The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the river delta in shades of gold and orange. For Lieutenant Arik Holt, a human engineer stationed on the newly colonized planet of Erythra, this view never failed to calm him. He had seen countless worlds, but the endless rivers and floating islands here felt alive, as if the planet itself breathed through the water. Beside him, Dr. Lyra Venn, a fellow scientist and close friend, scanned the edge of the delta with her high-tech visor, recording data on the local ecosystem. "Arik," she called, pointing at a small cluster of luminous algae floating downstream. "These readings are off the charts. I've never seen anything like it. The bioluminescence is almost organized." Arik adjusted his visor and peered through. "Organized, you say? That's weird. But you might be right. It almost looks like it's moving in patterns." Lyra's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Exactly. It could be a form of communication, maybe even intelligence." Arik shook his head with a half-smile. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Last time we did that, we nearly caused a containment breach." She laughed, her voice light and teasing. "You worry too much, Holt." The gentle banter faded as both of them stepped closer to the riverbank, carefully balancing on wet, slippery stones. The water here was fast-moving, fed by underground springs that made the river unpredictable. Despite the serene appearance, Erythra's rivers could change in moments, and seasoned explorers knew to respect their power. As Arik bent down to examine a glowing stone, a sudden roar echoed from upstream. The ground trembled lightly, and the water ahead began to churn violently. "Lyra, watch out!" Arik shouted, lunging toward her. But it was too late. A massive surge of water swept across the bank like an invisible hand, catching Lyra by surprise. She stumbled, arms flailing, and the river snatched her from the stones. Arik dove without thinking, gripping her wrist, but the current was stronger than any human could resist. The pair tumbled downstream, swallowed by the rushing water. The cold hit Arik first. It was sharper than anything he had experienced on Earth or in any of the colony's artificial environments. His body clenched, muscles tightening as he tried to stay afloat. Lyra, struggling to keep her head above water, clutched a floating branch desperately. "Arik!" she cried, panic in her voice. I can't. Hang on, I've got you!" he shouted, reaching for her. His own equipment and supplies were swept away in the current, leaving him bare-handed, but he held firm. Slowly, inch by inch, he pulled her toward a cluster of floating debris. Finally, they reached a makeshift raft of broken branches and river plants. Lyra collapsed onto it, shivering violently. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her, and much of her equipment had been carried away by the flood. Arik noticed her discomfort immediately. Without hesitation, he removed his own shirt and offered it to her. "Here," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Take my shirt." Lyra blinked in surprise, her face flushed from both cold and embarrassment. You don't mind?" Arik shook his head. "Of course not. We need to keep you warm, that's all. This planet's river isn't exactly friendly." She hesitated for a moment, then gratefully accepted it, wrapping it around herself. The human fabric, simple as it was, offered some comfort against the biting cold. For Arik, the gesture was natural. For him, humans always had a way of helping each other, instinctively, even in strange worlds. That instinct had kept their species alive for millennia, and he felt its strength now. Once Lyra was secure, Arik took a moment to scan the surroundings. The flood had swept away much of the delta's surface flora, revealing hidden pools and channels. But something else caught his eye, soft, pulsing lights beneath the water, moving deliberately. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing. Lyra leaned forward, her damp hair sticking to her forehead. "The algae. It's not just floating, it's forming shapes, letters, symbols." Arik's brow furrowed. "Could be. Or Could be something else entirely. Either way, it's guiding us. They followed the lights cautiously, using the floating debris as a makeshift raft. The current was strong, but by working together, they managed to steer their small vessel along the safer channels. Every step required attention. One misstep, and they risked being swept back into the stronger currents. Hours seemed to pass in silence, broken only by the roar of water and occasional muttered instructions between them. Despite exhaustion, Arik marveled at the adaptability of humans. Where other species might panic, humans thrived on problem-solving, empathy, and teamwork. He had seen it in space stations, on barren moons, and now in the wild rivers of Erythra. Finally, as the sun dipped lower, they reached a small bank protected by overhanging rocks. Exhausted but safe for the moment, they pulled their raft onto the shore. Lyra sank to the ground, wrapping herself tightly in Arik's shirt. Her teeth chattered, but she smiled faintly. "You saved me," she said softly. "And you'd do the same for me," Arik replied. "Humans stick together." For a long moment, they simply watched the river, the floodwaters still churning beyond the safety of the bank. Then Lyra's eyes caught the glowing lights again, moving beneath the water. "What are they?" she whispered. Arik stood, scanning carefully. "I don't know yet, but we'll find out. And whatever they are, I have a feeling we're not just visitors here. We're part of something bigger." That night, they built a small fire with the debris they could find, keeping watch as the delta settled under the stars. The river still whispered its secrets. And somewhere beneath its surface, the pulsing lights continued their mysterious dance. As they huddled together for warmth, Arik couldn't help but think about humanity, their ingenuity, resilience, and compassion. The flood had been sudden, dangerous, and terrifying, but it had also shown the best parts of them. He glanced at Lyra, smiling faintly. "Tomorrow," he said, "we see what this river really wants to show us." Lyra nodded, eyes reflecting both fear and wonder. "Tomorrow." Above them, the twin moons of Erythra rose, casting silver light on the restless waters. And beneath, the glowing currents moved with purpose, waiting for the humans brave enough to understand them. The first light of dawn spread across the river delta, painting the waters in soft pinks and silvers. The flood had calmed overnight, leaving the landscape changed. Driftwood and floating debris formed strange new channels, and the ground was slick with mud. Arik and Lyra rose from their small fire, still wrapped in the warmth of Arik's shirt. Their exhaustion from the previous day was heavy, but curiosity pushed them forward. Arik stretched, rubbing his stiff arms. "We should explore the new channels. The flood moved a lot of water around. Something may have been uncovered." Lyra nodded, scanning the riverbank. "And maybe we can figure out those glowing lights. They didn't just vanish last night." They began their trek along the water, stepping carefully over wet stones and tangled plants. The river was alive in ways they hadn't expected. Fish that shimmered with neon colors darted under the surface, and algae floated in slow, swirling patterns. The bioluminescent organisms they had glimpsed the day before pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat beneath the water. "Look at that," Lyra whispered, pointing at a patch of glowing algae that formed circular shapes. "It's like it's signaling something." Arik leaned closer, examining the shapes. Could be a natural reaction to the river's current, or it could be something smarter, something alive. They moved further downstream, following the glowing paths. The river narrowed, forming a winding tunnel bordered by overgrown vegetation. The pulsing lights became brighter, more deliberate, almost like a guiding thread. "It's leading us somewhere," Arik said. "We need to be careful. If it's intelligent, it may not like surprises." They continued cautiously, stepping into shallow areas where rocks broke the current. Every sense was alert: the sounds of water, the smells of wet earth, even the faint vibration of the glowing organisms beneath them. Arek's engineer instincts kicked in. He examined the riverbed with a small scanner, noting unusual energy readings that seemed to come from the glowing life forms. "Energy levels are unusual," he murmured. "This isn't just bioluminescence. There's some sort of electromagnetic signature." Lyra's eyes widened. "Do you think they're communicating?" "It's possible," Arek said. "Humans are good at noticing patterns. Maybe they are too." As they walked, a small wave knocked Lyra off balance. Arek grabbed her wrist just in time, pulling her back to safety. "Careful," he warned. "This river still has power." "I know," she replied, brushing mud from her clothes. I've never seen anything like this. The flood, the algae, the lights. It's like the river has a mind of its own." Arek smiled faintly. "And humans have minds too. That's why we're here. To understand, to adapt, to survive." They pressed on until they reached a shallow pool, unusually still compared to the rushing river. The glowing organisms were concentrated here, forming intricate patterns that rippled outward like a living mandala. Lyra knelt beside the pool, placing her hands near the water without touching it. "They're reacting to us," she said. "It's almost like they're curious." Arek crouched beside her, watching carefully. "We should test that. Slowly. No sudden movements." He picked up a small rock and gently dropped it near the edge of the glowing pattern. The lights shifted, forming shapes around the rock almost as if inspecting it. Lyra gasped softly. "It's intelligent," she whispered. Arek nodded, eyes bright with wonder. "Humans have always faced the unknown, and we've always adapted. This is just another challenge." They spent hours observing, making careful notes and sketches. The glowing organisms seemed to form sequences, almost like letters, but not any language they recognized. They weren't hostile. In fact, they seemed to encourage calm and patience. Arek realized that the species might be trying to teach them something. "We should mark this location," he said. "If this is a form of communication, we need to return with tools and more time." As they set up temporary markers, the river shifted again. A gentle current tugged at their feet, carrying them toward a small cavern partially hidden by overhanging rocks. Inside, faint glows reflected off wet stone walls. The air smelled of damp minerals and something faintly sweet. "This place wasn't here yesterday," Lyra said, eyes wide. "The flood must have revealed it." Arek examined the entrance. "Or it revealed them, whatever lives in here." With caution, they stepped inside. The glowing algae clung to walls and crevices, illuminating the cavern in a soft, greenish blue. The patterns on the walls seemed deliberate, as though someone, or something, had arranged them. "It's like an underwater library," Lyra said, awe in her voice. "A message written in light." Arek crouched, touching a patch of glowing organisms. The lights shifted under his hand, forming lines and curves he instinctively recognized as patterns. "They're responding to us," he said. "They want interaction, not conflict." They spent the rest of the day exploring the cavern, discovering shallow pools connected by tiny channels. Each pool contained its own cluster of glowing life forms, pulsing rhythmically in sequences. Arek and Lyra realized that the river delta was more than just a landscape. It was a living system, one that could communicate and adapt. As night fell, the cavern glowed softly, bathing them in a calming light. Lyra leaned against the rock wall, exhausted but exhilarated. "I can't believe this," she said. "We're seeing something completely new, and it's alive, thinking, maybe even teaching us." Arek nodded, taking a deep breath. "Humans have always faced danger and mystery. We survived deserts, oceans, space itself. And now, on this planet, we're facing something entirely different, but we'll learn it. We'll adapt. We always do. For the first time since the flood, both felt a sense of peace. The river was no longer a threat. It was a guide, a teacher, and humans, with their ingenuity, empathy, and curiosity, had the chance to understand it. Before sleeping, Arik set up a small observation post near the pool, taking careful notes of the glowing patterns. Lyra did the same, her excitement undiminished by fatigue. They were determined to decode the signals, not just to survive, but to understand a completely new form of life. Somewhere deep in the water, the glowing pulses seemed to acknowledge their presence, brightening in a slow, rhythmic pattern that almost resembled a heartbeat. Arik looked at Lyra and smiled. "Tomorrow," he said, "we make our first real connection." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the soft glow. "And humans are ready." The night passed quietly, with only the soft whisper of water and the faint pulse of the glowing organisms for company. The river, once a force of danger, had become a source of wonder. For humans, it was a reminder of why they thrived in the universe. Not just strength, but curiosity, courage, and compassion. When dawn came, they woke refreshed and ready. The flood had tested them, the river had challenged them, and the glowing life beneath the water was waiting for humans brave enough to understand its secrets. Arik glanced at Lyra. "Are you ready?" "Always," she replied. And together they stepped back into the shallow waters, following the pulsing lights deeper into the mysteries of Erythra. The morning sun spilled over the river delta, casting golden light across the wet stones and sparkling water. Arik and Lyra had spent the night near the glowing pools, their makeshift camp cozy despite the damp surroundings. The flood had left its mark, but it had also revealed something remarkable, a hidden system of caverns and shallow pools pulsing with strange, intelligent light. Arik stretched, rubbing his sore muscles. "If yesterday taught us anything," he said, "it's that this planet likes to surprise us." Lyra laughed softly, still wrapping herself in Arik's shirt. "Surprise is one word for it. I'd say challenge is more accurate." He smiled, looking toward the pools. "Challenge, yes, but we're human. Challenges are what we do best." With that, they set out along the riverbank. The goal was clear: explore the glowing network more carefully and figure out what the strange organisms wanted. This time, they were prepared. Arik carried a small toolkit, sensors, scanners, and makeshift probes crafted from what remained of their supplies. Lyra carried her notebook, documenting everything they observed, from water flow to patterns in the light. The water ran higher than usual, and the river's current was unpredictable. They moved carefully, stepping from stone to stone, sometimes wading in the shallows, sometimes clinging to floating debris. Arik paused to examine a piece of driftwood caught in the river's current. "This could be useful," he said, slicing the wood with a small tool. "We can make a raft, or even a floating platform. If we need to reach deeper pools, we'll need it." Lyra watched him work. "You always think ahead, Arik. I don't know how you do it." "It's human nature," he said, smiling. "Adapt, survive, solve problems. That's what we do." Hours passed as they built their makeshift raft. The current was strong, but with ingenuity and teamwork, they managed to secure a flat, sturdy platform. Lyra tested it carefully, stepping onto the raft with Arik holding one side for balance. The glowing organisms beneath the water pulsed brighter, almost as if acknowledging their efforts. "It likes this," Arik said, watching the lights. "They respond to creativity and problem-solving. Maybe it's their way of measuring us." Lyra nodded, fascinated. "Humans are clever. That's why we survive in strange places. Even against the odds, we figure things out." Their exploration led them to a deeper cavern, hidden behind hanging vegetation and jagged rocks. The glow of the organisms was stronger here, illuminating walls covered with strange patterns that seemed deliberate. Arik set up sensors to scan the energy signatures, while Lyra documented the glowing shapes. "These patterns," she whispered. "They almost look like a map, or instructions. Maybe even a story." Arik leaned over, adjusting the scanner. "Could be. And humans are good at decoding signals. That's what we do in space, in emergencies, everywhere. We find meaning where others see chaos." They spent the rest of the day experimenting. Arik carefully placed stones in specific arrangements, and the glowing organisms shifted in response. Lyra mimicked the patterns with small sticks, creating shapes on the shallow water surface. Every action produced a reaction, lights pulsing, moving, forming new sequences. "It's communication," Lyra said, eyes wide. "They're teaching us something, or maybe learning from us." Arik nodded. "Could be both. Humans have always adapted by learning from the environment, and maybe these creatures are learning from us too." As the sun began to set, a sudden tremor ran through the cavern. The water rippled violently, knocking the raft slightly off balance. Arik grabbed Lyra's arm to steady her, and both froze as the glowing organisms surged in intensity. Pulses of light shot across the pool like beams, moving faster than before. "Stay calm," Arik said, his voice steady. "We've faced worse. Humans stay calm. Humans adapt." Lyra took a deep breath, trying to match his composure. "What is it doing?" she asked. "It's testing us," he said, "or warning us. Either way, humans don't panic. We solve problems." Using his tools, Arik gently manipulated the stones and sticks to mimic the new light patterns. Slowly, the pulsing eased, the water calmed, and the organisms settled into a softer, rhythmic glow. Both breathed a sigh of relief. "That was intense," Lyra said, "but we made it through. That's human ingenuity at work." Arik smiled faintly. "Exactly. Humans survive because we think, we act, we cooperate. We don't just react. That's why we thrive in places no other species can." Night fell, and they camped near the deeper cavern, the glowing lights casting soft shadows on the rock walls. The river's whispers and the pulsing glow formed a strange lullaby. Arik and Lyra huddled together for warmth and comfort, discussing the day's discoveries. "I think we're seeing the beginnings of first contact," Arik said, "not with an aggressive species, but with one that challenges us intellectually. And humans are ready for that challenge." Lyra nodded. "We survived the flood. We built a raft. We figured out some of the patterns. That's what humans do. We learn, we adapt, we keep going." The next morning, they continued deeper into the river delta. Using their raft, they reached smaller pools that seemed isolated from the main flow. Here, the glowing organisms were even more concentrated. They moved in spirals and waves, almost like an underwater dance. Arik took out his scanner and placed it gently into the water. The readings were extraordinary. Energy levels far beyond anything recorded on Earth or even in other colonies pulsed from the organisms. "They're powerful," he said. "Not dangerous, but extraordinary. Humans have a knack for understanding extraordinary things and making sense of them." Lyra studied the patterns carefully, mimicking the light sequences with her hands in shallow water. Slowly, a rhythm emerged, a sequence that repeated, then changed, then repeated again. She looked at Arik, eyes bright with excitement. "They're teaching us a pattern," she said, "something we can understand if we keep watching." Arik nodded. "And we will. Humans never give up. That's why we explore, why we survive, why we thrive. Even on a world like this, we find a way." As they experimented, the water around them shifted subtly. Small, fish-like creatures darted between their feet, attracted to the lights and their movements. Arik observed them carefully, They're not just responding to patterns. They're curious, like humans. They're intelligent in their own way. Humans and erythran life forms, Lyra said softly. Two species learning from each other. That's amazing. They spent the day documenting everything, taking careful notes, sketching patterns, and testing reactions. Each success brought a small surge of confidence, a reminder that humans were capable of facing the unknown and thriving. As night fell, they returned to the safe bank, tired but exhilarated. The river had been a challenge, but humans had met it head-on. Arik looked at the glowing pools one last time, a small smile on his face. Tomorrow, he said, we go deeper. We find out what they really want. And humans are ready for anything. Lyra nodded, wrapping herself in Arik's spare shirt. We survive, we adapt, we learn. That's what humans do. And under the twin moons of Erythra, with glowing currents swirling around them, Arik and Lyra prepared for the next step. The river, once a force of danger, was now a teacher, and humans, with courage, curiosity, and ingenuity, were ready to understand its secrets. The river delta was quiet in the early morning, the mist curling over the water in soft, silver tendrils. Arik and Lyra had spent the past 2 days observing the glowing organisms and testing patterns, learning slowly, cautiously, but today felt different. The river pulsed with energy, brighter than before, as though it anticipated their next move. Something's changed, Lyra whispered, scanning the water with wide eyes. It's more intense than yesterday. Arik nodded, his jaw tight with focus. They know we're ready for the next step. Humans are always ready when we need to be. We think, we adapt, we survive. They carefully placed their raft into the shallow water and started down a narrow channel. The glow of the organisms guided them like a living lantern. Every movement was deliberate. Every glance was careful. The creatures were intelligent, yes, but Arik knew better than to assume their behavior would always be predictable. Humans thrived on observation and adaptation, and that was the key to making contact safely. The channel widened into a large underground pool hidden beneath overhanging rocks and luminescent algae. The water here was still, clear and glowing with soft blues and greens. At the center of the pool, the light pulses converged into a swirling vortex, almost like a living eye. Arik held the raft steady while Lyra leaned forward, her hand hovering above the water. They're waiting, she said softly, almost in awe. Arik nodded. And humans are patient. We think, we plan, we respect boundaries. That's how we make allies, even in unknown worlds. Carefully, Arik extended a sensor probe into the water. It emitted a soft hum and recorded the energy patterns. Immediately, the glowing organisms reacted, pulses rippling outward in rapid sequences. Lyra took notes frantically, matching the pulses with sketches and symbols. They're responding to the sensor, she said. They understand it's part of us. Maybe they're curious about how humans interact with tools. Arik smiled faintly. Curiosity is a human trait too. That's why we thrive. We explore, we learn, we adapt. And right now, they're learning from us as much as we are from them. Minutes passed. Then, without warning, a larger shape emerged from the center of the pool. It was fluid, almost like a living ribbon of light, twisting and swirling with a mesmerizing rhythm. Its movements were deliberate, almost like it was watching them, evaluating them. Arik, Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with excitement and caution. It's alive. Yes, he replied softly. And humans can face this. We communicate, we adapt, we survive. Let's see what it wants. Arik lifted a small stone and held it above the water, letting it drop gently onto the surface. The glowing creature responded immediately, swirling around the stone and forming intricate light patterns. Lyra leaned closer, mimicking the shapes with her fingers in shallow water. Slowly, a rhythm emerged, a back-and-forth pattern, almost like a conversation. "They're trying to communicate," Lyra said, eyes wide. "They're intelligent and patient." Arik nodded. "And humans are patient too. That's why we succeed where others fail. We adapt. We learn. We survive." They spent hours experimenting with signals, patterns, and movements. Each interaction was cautious but deliberate. The glowing creature reacted differently to different shapes, flows of water, and light sequences. Slowly, a sense of understanding developed. "They're teaching us," Lyra said softly. "But it's more than that. They want interaction, not just observation. They want partnership." Arik agreed. "Humans have always thrived on cooperation. That's why we survive in the harshest environments. And this is no different." As the sun reached its peak, a sudden tremor shook the cavern. Water sloshed against the rocks, and smaller glowing organisms darted in all directions. Arik held Lyra's arm to steady her, scanning the pool with urgency. "It's a test," he said firmly. "Humans don't panic. We solve problems. We adapt." Lyra took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they mimicked the patterns of the glowing creatures, adjusting to the shifting currents. Slowly, the water calmed, and the lights returned to their gentle rhythm. Both felt a surge of triumph, a confirmation that humans could handle even unexpected challenges with calm and ingenuity. "They trust us," Lyra whispered, eyes shining. "Or at least, they recognize we're capable." Arik smiled. "Exactly. Humans survive because we think, we adapt, we cooperate, and now, we're ready for the real first contact." The creature at the center of the pool shifted again, this time forming a long, flowing ribbon of light that stretched toward the raft. It paused, hovering above the water, then pulsed in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Lyra and Arik understood instinctively. This was an invitation. "Shall we?" Arik asked. Lyra nodded. "Humans face the unknown. That's what we do, always." Carefully, they extended their hands toward the glowing ribbon, letting it brush against their fingers. The sensation was like warmth and electricity combined, a gentle energy flowing into them without harm. Light pulsed through their fingertips, sending waves of patterns across the water. "It's incredible," Lyra breathed. "It's like it's sharing knowledge, showing us something." Arik nodded. "And humans. Humans are ready. We learn. We adapt. We survive. That's our strength." For the next several hours, they continued interacting with the creature. Every gesture, every ripple, every pattern of light was a message. Slowly, they began to recognize sequences, repeating pulses that hinted at structure, maybe even a language of sorts. "They're teaching us the basics," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder. "Maybe about their world, about themselves." Arik glanced at her, pride in his eyes. "And humans are learning. That's why we survive in every corner of the galaxy. Curiosity, patience, empathy, ingenuity. It's what makes us strong." As night fell, they set up a small observation point near the pool, taking careful notes and sketches. The glowing creature hovered nearby, its pulses slower now, almost as if it were resting, but still aware of them. "This is just the beginning," Arik said, staring at the lights. "Tomorrow, we'll understand more, and humans are always ready for what comes next." Lyra smiled, brushing her damp hair from her face. "We survived the flood. We survived the currents. We survived the unknown. And now, we're part of something bigger. Humans always rise to the challenge." Above them, the twin moons of Erythra reflected on the water, silver and calm. Beneath, the glowing creature pulsed gently, a silent witness to the first true contact between humans and a new form of intelligent life. and humans, with courage, patience, and ingenuity, had proven they were ready for it. The night was quiet, filled only with the gentle hum of the glowing organism and the soft lapping of water against the rocks. And as Arik and Lyra drifted to sleep, they knew that tomorrow would bring deeper understanding, new challenges, and a bond that might shape the future of Erythra itself. The first light of dawn painted the river delta in soft gold, reflecting off the calm waters. The previous days had been exhausting, filled with floods, glowing organisms, and the discovery of intelligent life beneath Erythra's rivers. But today, Arik and Lyra felt a sense of purpose. They had survived, adapted, and learned, and now they were ready to explore the final mysteries the river delta held. Arik stretched and adjusted his equipment, glancing at Lyra, who was checking her notes. "This is it," he said, voice firm but calm. "We know the patterns. We've built trust. Today we see what this all leads to." Lyra nodded, eyes sparkling with determination. "Humans face the unknown. That's what we do. Let's find out what they want to show us." They pushed their makeshift raft into the water, the glowing organisms forming gentle trails beneath the surface as if guiding them forward. The river was calm, almost welcoming, a sharp contrast to the floods of days before. Yet beneath the serene surface, both knew danger could return in an instant. "This river has tested us," Arik said quietly, "and humans always survive tests. We think, we adapt, we overcome." Lyra smiled faintly. "And we always learn. That's how we thrive." The raft carried them through a narrow channel that opened into a larger pool, wider and deeper than any they had seen. Here, the glowing organisms formed complex patterns, spiraling around a central mound of stones and floating debris. It looked almost like a throne, a natural altar of light. Arik paused, scanning the pool with his sensors. "The energy levels here, they're off the charts. Whatever is guiding these organisms is powerful and intelligent." Lyra crouched beside the water, her reflection mixing with the glowing currents. "It feels alive. Not just alive, but aware. Like it knows we're here, and it's waiting for us." Carefully, Arik extended a sensor probe toward the central mound. The glowing organisms surged instantly, forming intricate shapes in response to the probe. Then a larger shape emerged from the center, a ribbon of pure light, twisting and pulsing in rhythm with the currents. It hovered above the water, its movement deliberate and graceful. "It's the same one from before," Lyra whispered. "And it's showing us something." Arik nodded. "Humans have always understood patterns. That's why we thrive in every corner of the universe. Let's see what it wants to teach us." They spent hours interacting with the ribbon of light, mimicking its patterns with sticks, stones, and gentle movements in the water. Slowly, sequences of pulses began to make sense. There was structure, repetition, even an obvious logic. The glowing organism was teaching them, step by step, like a mentor guiding students. "It's remarkable," Lyra said, eyes wide with wonder. "We're learning from an entirely different form of intelligence. Something completely alien." Arik smiled faintly. "And humans are always ready for this. Curiosity, patience, ingenuity. We thrive in the unknown." The day wore on, and the river delta revealed more secrets. Hidden channels led to shallow pools filled with floating plants and energy-rich crystals. Some of the crystals seemed to respond to the glowing organisms, lighting up in rhythm with the patterns. Arik realized they could harness these natural energies to build temporary devices or even signal back to the colony. "Humans survive because we adapt," he said. "We learn from the environment, use its tools, and solve problems. This river, it's no different." Lyra agreed, her eyes scanning the glowing waters. "And humans build connections, not just survive. We communicate, cooperate, and thrive even in places no other species can. As night fell, the glowing organisms gathered near the central mound, pulsing in unison. Arik and Lyra sat quietly on the raft, observing. Suddenly, a surge of energy rippled through the pool, pushing their raft gently forward. It was as if the organisms were guiding them to the river's heart. "Looks like they want us to follow," Lyra said softly. Arik nodded, eyes bright with excitement. "Humans follow challenges, not fear. Let's see what's ahead." The raft carried them toward a hidden chamber beneath an overhanging rock formation. The water here was deeper, calmer, and the glow was more intense than ever. At the center, the ribbon of light transformed into a dome of shimmering energy, pulsating with intricate patterns that filled the cavern with gentle illumination. "It's a sanctuary," Lyra whispered. "Or maybe a message." Arik carefully scanned the dome with his sensors. "The energy readings, this is something beyond anything human technology has seen. And yet, humans can understand it slowly, step by step. That's why we survive in the universe." They approached the dome, extending hands cautiously. The energy flowed around them without harm, almost like a warm embrace. The glowing organisms circled them, forming protective patterns, as if acknowledging their bravery and intelligence. "They recognize us as capable," Arik said. "Humans always rise to challenges. We think, we adapt, we persevere. That's our strength." Lyra reached out, letting the energy wash over her fingertips. Light pulsed into her senses, conveying patterns and sequences. Slowly, she realized it was not just a message, it was a gift of knowledge, an understanding of the river's ecosystem, the glowing organisms, and the energy that powered it. "They're giving us insight," she said, awe in her voice. "We can use this to help the colony and maybe to protect this place." Arik nodded. "Humans survive because we combine knowledge with action. We learn, we apply, we protect. And now, this river has shared its secrets with us." They spent the night in the sanctuary, documenting every detail, every pulse, every reaction of the glowing organisms. The river had tested them, challenged them, and now rewarded their courage and ingenuity. Humans had proven themselves not through brute strength, but through intelligence, patience, and empathy. As dawn approached, Arik and Lyra prepared to return to the colony. The glowing organisms pulsed one last time in a grand, sweeping rhythm, as if to say farewell and congratulations. "Humans have earned their place here," Arik said softly. "Not by force, but by understanding and courage." Lyra smiled, adjusting her notes and tools. "We survived the floods, we navigated the currents, and we connected with something completely alien. That's human heroism, adaptation, curiosity, and empathy combined." They guided their raft back along the river, following the glowing trails that had led them here. Every step, every movement reminded them of what made humans exceptional: the ability to face the unknown, solve problems, and connect with life in ways that no other species could. When they finally emerged onto the open delta, the twin moons of Erythra reflected on the calm waters. The river seemed peaceful now, its mysteries respected and acknowledged. Arik and Lyra looked at each other, smiles of triumph on their faces. "Humans always rise to the challenge," Arik said, "no matter where we go." "And we always learn," Lyra added. "That's why we thrive. That's why we survive." As they made their way back to the colony, they carried not only knowledge, but also a story of courage, ingenuity, and first contact with an entirely new form of intelligent life. The river of Erythra had tested them, and humans had risen to the occasion, proving once again that adaptability, intelligence, and empathy were traits that allowed their species to survive and even flourish, in the most extraordinary circumstances. Above them, the sky turned from silver to gold, and the distant colony shimmered on the horizon. The river delta lay behind them, glowing softly, a living testament to the bond between humans and the unknown. And as they stepped onto solid ground, Arik and Lyra knew that humans had not just survived, they had triumphed. Humans had proven once again that no matter how strange or dangerous the universe might be, they could rise, adapt, and emerge victorious. And the river of Erythra, with its glowing secrets and intelligent life, had welcomed them as equals, sharing its mysteries with those brave enough to understand.